For the last 8 decades, the rules governing life for billions of people were largely written in just 3 cities: Washington, London, and Brussels. Following the end of World War II, the global landscape reorganized into a unipolar order. A single coalition, led by the United States and Europe, managed the security and trade of the non-communist world. Washington and its allies cemented this influence by building a vast architecture of new political and financial institutions designed to regulate the global economy. Organizations like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, became the chief architects of development, setting the specific terms for how countries could borrow money, trade, and grow. The engine powering this entire system was the US dollar, established as the world's reserve currency and routed through the SWIFT network, the mandatory financial highway for almost all cross-border trade. For developing nations, this predictability came at a price. Emerging economies often had to accept strict austerity measures and domestic policy shifts in exchange for loans, despite having almost no voting power in the institutions deciding their future. This structural imbalance created a mounting tension between the global rulemakers and the nations living under their rules. This map illustrates the physical reality of the modern economy. It shows the concentration of critical resources across the developing world. Nations in the global south hold a commanding majority of the world's crude oil and critical minerals required for modern electronics. Historically, these raw materials were pulled from the earth almost exclusively to fuel industrial growth in the United States and Europe. But that extraction created a lasting vulnerability. The West requires a constant, uninterrupted flow of these foreign resources simply to maintain its economic baseline. By controlling these supply chains, developing nations have recognized their leverage. They have the physical collateral to stop being passive rule takers and start demanding a seat at the table. This collective of developing nations is actively rejecting the 80-year-old script, refusing to operate strictly under Western conditions. The organized vanguard of this pushback is the BRICS coalition. It represents a massive demographic bloc and an economic output that rivals the traditional Western powers. The coalition spans multiple continents, beginning in South America with the agricultural and resource wealth of Brazil. It stretches across the massive landmass of Eurasia, pulling in the deep energy reserves of Russia and the manufacturing dominance of China. And it anchors itself in Africa through South Africa, establishing a global alternative network to the old Western order. They are countering Western dominance through economics, utilizing a process called de-dollarization. De-dollarization is the active shift toward trading directly in local currencies, like the Chinese yuan. By settling trades outside the SWIFT network, these nations bypass Western financial oversight and insulate their economies from the threat of U.S. sanctions. Decoupling their financial systems strikes directly at the structural pillars built in 1945, creating severe economic friction that challenges the foundation of Western authority. India's current foreign policy disrupts the idea of a simple global divide. On one hand, India is aggressively deepening its ties with the United States and Europe, securing advanced technology transfers and signing new defense pacts. On the other hand, New Delhi remains a founding member of BRICS, champions the priorities of the global south, and buys millions of barrels of discounted Russian oil. India is executing a strategy called multi-alignment. They act as a strategic bridge, maintaining lucrative relationships with fiercely hostile blocs simultaneously. This approach proves that the rising powers of the 21st century refuse to be boxed into strict ideological camps. They are prioritizing their own national interests over old allegiances. The fracturing of the old unipolar pillar is creating something more complex than one superpower simply replacing another. This is a multipolar order, a system with multiple, shifting centers of gravity. In this new environment, rigid blocks are less relevant. As this map illustrates, countries are weaving complex, overlapping trade networks. They form transactional partnerships based on mutual economic benefit, often bypassing traditional Western hubs entirely. Within this decentralized web, agile nations thrive. By acting as connective tissue, they can draw on the resources of both sides without committing to either. The architecture of power has decentralized. International relations are becoming increasingly transactional, with national self-interest taking precedence over the rigid ideological alliances of the past. With global influence now distributed across dozens of capitals, we have to ask, are we witnessing a temporary transition, or is the era of the undisputed superpower gone for good? Let us know what you think in the comments, and subscribe to see our next breakdown.